We black men of England, too proud to cry for shame. Let's cry a sea, cry publicly, expose our very pain. For Babylon, the bandit is our sister's trail. The bad talk and the cool walk will not keep us out of jail. We black men of England, our guns are killing us. How dare we? Now hear me. How great is dangerous. There's a fascist and a druggist out to get our kith and kin. Let silent guns save our sons. The power is within. We black men of England excel as if in sport. For our people, because some people want to see our face in court. When we black men of England look the mirror in the face, through our sisters' eyes, we men shall rise as proud sons of our race. That was a poem by Benjamin Zephaniah, a really amazing poem called SOS. And of course, in this case, SOS means save our sons and not save ourselves. But hello, everybody, and welcome to I Can't Breathe, the show where air is free. See the change, be the change. And today, if you haven't seen around social media, then you have no idea what we're talking about today. But what we're talking about today is education. And we're going to be talking about why it's important that we educate our children right, and we educate them on the right things. Why is it important that we decolonize education? We make education not just about the white experience or seeing things through a white man's eyes, but we learn everything that there is to learn, because there's so much knowledge that's hidden from us. So why don't we actually learn about it in school? How different would we be now if we had the opportunity to learn about it in school? So that's basically what we're going to be talking about today. So the reason why I chose, if you just joining, then hello, welcome. And if you just joined, then I just finished reading a poem by Benjamin Zephaniah called SOS, standing for Save Our Sons. And I read this poem because it's a great poem. It's a fantastic poem, but not just because it's a great poem. But I read this poem because during college, I studied English literature. Among other A-levels, I studied English literature, was one of them. And I studied this, and we learned about writers and poets like William Blake, John Keats, Philip Larkin, William Shakespeare, people like this, right? And as you know, these are all white writers. These are all white poets, right? But then there was one lesson where we read a poem by Benjamin Zephaniah, and I loved it. I loved his approach. I loved what he spoke about. We never ever discussed anything like that in school before, and it was amazing. But I wasn't able to study it because it wasn't in the syllabus. It wasn't a part of the curriculum, and it meant that I couldn't study it. And I wanted to study this amazing poem or this amazing poet that I learned about, but I couldn't because it wasn't a part of the curriculum, because everyone who was a part of the curriculum was white. And so I keep thinking that, would I have got a better grade? I mean, I passed, and I passed very, very well, okay, because I got a B in English literature at A-level, which I'm very, very proud of. But would I have got better if I was writing about something that I was actually passionate about? If I wasn't forced to learn about these different writers and things like that I'm now having to understand. But why don't you put something in front of me that I actually want to understand? Something in front of me that I want to write about. And this is why we think it's so important that we talk about decolonizing education. We talk about making education diverse, because I feel like everyone, or a lot of people who are just becoming awake now when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, would they have become awake earlier if education did their part? Because it's called education. And a big part of the Black Lives Matter movement is we all encourage each other to educate ourselves. But we're having to educate ourselves because education isn't educating us. So we think it's so important that education needs to make steps to educate us. But You have people on that are going to explain it miles better than I ever could. And so, without further ado, we're going to invite those people on. So, today, I've got a really great show for you. We got a woman who also studied with me at college. She was in my film studies class. And we'll have her on. And we'll also have Ella on, if you remember her from the first show. Really excited to have her on. But first up, we're going to have someone on that you might have seen on my story or Young and Talented's story. Was a special guest. Now, if you watch Hollyoaks, you'll know who this person is. Because they're a series regular on Hollyoaks. His name is Trevor. And I'm really excited to hear everything that he has to say. Especially since he went to school like a while ago. so it's really interesting to hear about his experiences in school. So without further ado, Trevor, I'm gonna invite you in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm just coming to terms with this technology being a grey beard and all that. But I'm doing well. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
So for those who don't know, could you just let us know a little bit about yourself? Yeah,
my name's Trevor, as Jay kindly said. I'm going to call you Jay. I'm going to try to be down with the kids.
Awesome.
Anyway, my name's Trevor. I am an actor. I've been acting for quite a while. I am a father, a husband, a son, so on and so forth. I'm a regular, as Jay mentioned, on the series of Hollyoaks. I have been acting for approximately, off and on, for about 37 years, off and on. I first did my first ever professional gig in 1979, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah, when I was 19, that's the first professional gig. But you know, I've had breaks in between or whatever. So I would say that I've been kind of doing it straight now without a break for the last 21 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, so
wow.
Yeah, for the last 21 years without a break. As in, that's what I do for a living. I also sing, and found out yesterday, I admitted yesterday to Jay that I don't dance, unlike himself, who's a triple threat, who dances, singing, and acts. Yes, what else can I tell you about myself? I'm 59 years old. I'll be 60 next birthday. I have 6 children, ranging from the age of 34, 33, 25, well, she's not 25 yet, she'll be 25 in August, 24, 19, 15, and 13.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a range. Yeah, that's a range. What else? I think that's enough about myself, really. Do you know what I mean? I've introduced you, you know, and you found out more about me than most people do.
Yeah, no, we now have like a massive sort of like a pull into your world, which is what I which is what I really appreciate. I'll tell you what, before I go on to the next question, you've been acting for 21 years.
Yeah, on a straight.
That is incredible.
Yeah. Well, I've actually been acting for 37 years, but without a break, 21 years.
Without a break, 21. Because that's what I'm trying to do. Like,
okay.
That is like what I'd love to do is just act and do all different kinds of projects and stuff like that. Like, I think that's really, really sick. That's really sick.
Well, thank you. And there's no reason that you can't do that.
Yeah. There is no even my friend Joseph said, "Wow, yeah, exactly right. 21 years. I'm 20 years old. So
okay,
you've been acting for longer than I've been alive without a break. That's mad to think about. Wow.
I suppose from your perspective, it is mad to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in hindsight, you know, everything looks easy in hindsight because you know, I've amassed an amount of time, a day at a time. That's the thing. I've not set out and gone, I'm going to do 21 years of acting. I'm going to act for the rest of my life. I've started off, and I take each day as it comes. And you never know where this job takes you.
Yeah.
Where this career path will take you.
Yeah, it's true.
But take each day as it comes.
As it comes.
As opposed to, because what we do a lot of the times, you know, is we miss the moment because we're so busy looking down there. Make plans. There's an old saying: if you want to make God laugh, make a plan. Do you know what I mean? make plans, but focus on where you are at the moment, because sometimes we miss the steps that can get us to 21 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so if I can give you a nugget, let me give you that.
Well, I haven't even moved on to the first question yet, and we've already got buckets of wisdom flying out.
Well, it works both ways, my brother.
This is going to be an awesome episode. So, tell me a little bit about your experience as a Black person in school. Like, what was that like? Okay, as a Black person in school, you have to remember I went to school in this country in the late 60s. Because I was born here, went to Grenada, spent a few years in Grenada, about 9 years in Grenada, and came back to this country. So late 60s and throughout the 70s. 79 is when I left school. Okay, so this country was a very different country back then. Yeah, it was a very different country. Going to school back then was not easy as a black person. School wasn't geared to deal with me or people of our hue, of our color, of our different cultures that we all come from. It just wasn't geared to deal with that at all. So the whole premise of school was basically to cram us with so-called education and then throw us out the door. But in our case, they did not expect much from us. I remember coming back from Grenada, being in a primary school, going to school, and they're saying, right, do you know your 2 times table? I went, well, I know my 12 times table. And they're like, no, you can't. What do you mean you know your 12? Well, I do know my 12 times table. And who taught you? My mother taught me. Right? And school in Grenada, no, that's impossible. Your mother could not have taught you your 12 times table. Wow. And definitely schooling in Grenada, and the teacher I was talking to had no clue where Grenada was. But obviously knew that Grenada was populated by Black people. When schooling in Grenada, they're too primitive to have taught you your 12 times table. So you must have learned it somewhere else. So that was what school was like. Right. You know, it's teachers had no idea of us or different cultures. In fact, most teachers were quite ignorant about the different cultures of Black people and the way we connected, and the fact that there's different islands in the Caribbean and over 50 different countries in Africa. Yeah. You know, they were actually quite ignorant of that fact. They taught their subject, and that's all they were really interested in. And we were seeing, if we spoke out or said anything different or questioned anything, we were seen as troublemakers. Being in school in this country wasn't easy at all at that age. You know, there was a program that used to be on TV called Love Thy Neighbor. I don't know if you've ever heard about Love Thy Neighbor. Love Thy Neighbor. I think so. No, it's way before your time. Oh, really? But words that were used in Love Thy Neighbor, let me give you an example of why you probably have never heard of it, was nignog, sambo, coon, wog, gollywog. These were the words that were used regularly in this program, right? And in this program, the guy who plays Patrick in EastEnders, Rudolph Walker, he was one of 4 leads. There was him, I think it was Carmen Monroe, I could be mistaken, and a white guy, I can't remember what his real name was, and a white woman. And so it was 2 couples living next door to each other, hence Love Thy Neighbor. The Black couple move into this neighborhood, or into this neighborhood, and the white guy is like freaked out and blah, blah, blah. So they have this sort of love-hate relationship. And supposedly the Black guy won, you know, the moral victory every week in the story. But when you're being called Sambo and Nignog and so on and so forth every week on a TV screen, kids at school, for example, assimilate that. Yeah. Right? Yeah. When you're seeing yourself as a negative stereotype on the TV, you assimilate that. So the white kids are assimilating the stuff that's being called, that the white characters calling
the black character,
Yeah.
and the black kids are assimilating the crap that the black character has to put up with.
Right.
Because, you know, it's like if you call someone the N word, right, and then you call someone a cracker, the effect is completely two different things, you know, psychologically. Yeah. So to answer your question, and, you know, to get down to a nutshell, being in school in the 60s and 70s was not easy in this country. You know, because what we call this systemic racism was there. The school wasn't geared for us. You know, what happened was they had a curriculum, they followed their curriculum. That's what they were doing. Yeah. Right. Suddenly, there's an influx of black people come in, right? You know, from the Windrush generation and slightly before, there's an influx of black people that come into the country. They're not. The school system hasn't changed in any way. We're just slotted, trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, or vice versa. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not going to work. Yeah. So, does that help?
Yes. Yeah. That really does help. We actually have a follow-up question from the chat. They ask, how did you feel watching that at the time?
At the time, it was very interesting. Watching it at the time, I knew it was uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable. It felt wrong. But what I find interesting, myself and all my peers, sorry, I'm just taking a drink of water. Myself and all my peers carried on watching it. We would watch it every week, and then we'd go to school, and then we'd get into arguments and fights with the white boys. Right. But it didn't stop us from, you know, because let's be honest, you didn't see us on TV. So if you saw us on TV, everybody'd crowd around the TV watching us on TV, regardless how detrimental it was to us. So we'd be sitting there watching this program and be like proud that there's this black guy on the TV and black woman on the TV, but at the same time, totally confused about, you know, why is he calling us this? Why, you know, and there's not even because in those days there was no concept of this shouldn't be on TV. It just was. You know, there was no concept at all of that. There was another program, Mind Your Language, I think it was called, where there was a stereotypical Mickey taking of Asian people, right, and people and Arab people, and of people of African descent as well. So, you know, it was, and well, not just African people as well, and people of the diaspora. It was the same type of thing. It's, you know, all the stereotypical ideas of what a white writer, and this is, let's remember this, the people who wrote this were white, what a white writer assumed that we were from their stereotypical view of who we were. You know? Right, yeah. Yeah. Has that answered your question, sir? Yeah. Oh, my son's just joined.
Has he?
Hi, Sedge.
Oh, hello.
Wait, it says Sedju, so nice to meet you. Sedge. Yeah. How did you know I was on this? This is amazing. Okay. Okay, yeah.
So here's a sort of follow-up question from me as well. So what specifically could your school or could education have done to make your experience a better one as a black person?
Well, as a black person, okay. If I speak from today's perspective, there's a lot they could have done. From then, as I said, I don't even think they had any clue of what to do. You know, the first thing could have done is it's accepted that there is a massive influx now, massive for want of a better term, but there is an influx now of black people coming into your schools. Therefore, how do we cater for these black people? Because what you've been catering for is for white kids. So how do we cater for black kids coming in? What education system do we put in place? But the thing is, was there any appetite to change anything? I don't think there was. Because, you know, you have to have the appetite to want to change. You have to want change, right? The education system suited the narrative at the time and suited the narrative that the story is always written by the so-called victor, right? So his story, the story, your story, but it certainly wasn't my story. So if you look at the education system, you know, I learned nothing about myself or my culture, you know, slavery in it, because that's basically the only thing that we were ever really taught about. But it was always taught and then brushed over, if you know what I'm saying. So that it wasn't such a bad thing. And look what you've got from being descended from slaves. Look, you're in England now. You know.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
Silver linings and that.
exactly.
Yeah.
The streets are paved with gold. You are now here. You know, look at this. You could not have this in your country. Do you know what I mean? So what could be done? It could, well, for example, a simple thing that could have been done is when you showed a map of Africa, you showed the correct size of the map of Africa, right? Because Africa was seen as Africa, like England. Well, hang on. There's over 50 countries in Africa.
Yeah.
And the majority of them, England could fit inside about 20 times. Oh, what? If you not having your education supplemented at home, or if you haven't started teaching yourself, you don't know that. So you see Africa as this tiny little country, you know, as opposed to a continent.
Yeah.
So it's a simple thing that could have been done, but there was no appetite to do that because it was all about, you know, the Commonwealth, and you know, the sun never shines on the Commonwealth, basically, on Great Britain's empire, on the empire. There was a phrase: the sun never shines, never sets on the British Empire. Do you know what I'm saying? So, in any four corners, at any point, you could slot into the British Empire, and that's what we talked about: the British Empire, British kings and queens, British history. Do you know? And some people would argue, well, you're in Britain, that surely that's what you should be taught. But hang on, the backbone of this country, right, and the way it's set up was born, and a lot of your wealth came from slavery, right? And we had a life before slavery, and you know what was never taught to us. You know, we talked about this yesterday briefly. Nothing, and you mentioned it yourself with the poetry. You know, black writers. Hello.
Yeah.
True, black mathematicians. You know. Yeah, black inventors, they all existed, but we were never taught any of that. But we were taught that, it's black, exactly. Yeah. We were taught that we had no contribution to play in the growth of this society, which, you know, I think it was 3 years ago, I was part of a group of singers called Nitrovox who sang at the unveiling of a plaque to commemorate black men and women who had fallen during the First and Second World War in this country. Now, there was memorials for dogs, memorials for donkeys that fell during the war, memorials for so-called other Commonwealth country, Australia, Canada, etc., etc. Nothing for the black soldiers that had fallen of African descent, from Africa and the diaspora. And when you consider that we unveiled this plaque 3 years ago, that tells you something about how history has been. Because we were the cannon fodder. We were the first over the trenches. Yeah. We ran into the hails of bullets. When you could, I remember being in school and being told by a teacher, "Our parents fought in the war for you." Well, hang on a second. Once I re-educated myself and learned certain things, 2/3 of all African people who fought in the war, of a war that had nothing to do with them, died during that war. Yeah. For you.
Yeah. Do
you know what I mean? And you know, it's an interesting concept to realize. I'm interested that we are still fed from Darwin's science, who was a racist. Yeah, that's very true. Whoever you are, I can't see your name. Yes, Ella, very, very true. Thank you. You know, and that's the thing. It's you know, it's the fact that, again, the fact that the system was not set up for us. You know, we were supposed to be quiet and be slaves. That's what we were supposed to be. Yeah. Right. It was forced upon the British government to abolish slavery. Primarily from the slave ship Zong. Do some research, Zong, Z-O-N-G, find out about the slave ship Zong, and it's the insurance company, and fighting the insurance company because they threw us overboard, and so on and so forth. And they tried to claim insurance, and the insurance company, whoa, hang on, whoa, they're people. Well, that's the first time we were called people, because we were goods and chattel before. Yeah. So, you know, it wasn't set up. The system wasn't set up for us. The education system wasn't set up for us. So therefore, you know, the system that we inherited, and to this day are still trying to break down, is a system that had nothing. We had nothing to do with that system at all. So therefore, again, as I said, we're here, we go to the schools, and we think we're getting an education. Well, we are, but education's got nothing to do with us. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could go on, but yeah, I need to let you ask me questions.
Yeah.
So.
It's all good. It's all good because what you're saying is really hitting home, and I can tell that it's definitely hitting home for everyone at home right now. So I guess a big question would be, why is it so important moving forward, or right now? Why is it so important that we make education, or the curriculum, or even teachers in general? Why is it so important that we make education more diverse?
Because we have nowhere else to go. As far as I'm concerned, the thing is, it's not even we make it; it's imperative that it has to happen. People have now woken up to the fact that the education system does not serve us in any way, shape, or form. It's in place to keep us in a certain strata of society. Right? That's where it's supposed to keep us, and that's where we're supposed to be. But people have woken up to the fact, hang on, this has got nothing to do with me. Do you know what I mean? The only thing that it has to do with me is the fact that once a year you give me a month and you call it Black History Month. Well, actually, our history is 12 months of the year, every single day. Our history is every day, not once a month.
Yeah.
You know, there's no White History Month, but what does that mean? So, of course, it's important. It's important for our self-esteem. It is important for our well-being, our health. It is important for our equality within this society, as far as I'm concerned. And when I say equality in the society, this is an interesting thing because people think we're equal. If your education system is substandard, then you're not equal. Do you know?
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's important for us to teach each other too.
Yeah.
You know, if something is been in place for a very long time and people are used to the status quo, the people that carry on the status quo are very scared to change. It frightens them to change. You know. Sorry, I'm reading somebody's thing. They talk about Black history as if it weren't there as lead antagonist. It's our history, of course. But you know, I use another term. It's our story. We have our own story.
Yeah.
His story doesn't include her story. It's just his story.
It's just his story.
And you know what? I like to talk about our story. Do you know what I mean? We write our own narrative, and if we write our own narrative, then we can change the narrative that's being written for us. You know. So why is it important? It's important so that we have a say in our narrative now and going forward. It's important that we have a say in our narrative in the past. You know, it's important that we're you know, people like you can walk with your head held high, knowing that you have a part to play in the way this world is run. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's important that we connect in that way. Look, British history is taught all over the world. People know about British history all over the world.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? If I said to you, name 3 British playwrights, you probably could do it. If I said to you, name 3 African playwrights, you'd probably find that difficult.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And people say Shakespeare was the greatest writer in the world. Well, by whose criteria? Do you know? But you know what? I'm not saying he wasn't a great playwright, but whose criteria is he the greatest playwright that ever lived? Whose criteria is that?
Yeah.
It's not mine, but that's what I'm taught. That's what I'm supposed to believe.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's like, by whose criteria is, and that's the thing. By whose criteria do we base our knowledge on? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. We talked about doctors, we talked about scientists, we talked about inventors, you know, we talked about playwrights, we talked about all of these people exist within our communities as well. But by whose criteria do we, you know, in the job that I do, it's like I sometimes walk into different situations in the job that I'm doing over the years, and I look around and I don't see me in positions of power. I don't see me as, it's changed and it's changing slowly, but that has to start from the school.
Yeah.
Something I was saying to you yesterday.
Yeah.
Right? If Little Johnny and Little Winston, to use 2 stereotypical names, Little Johnny being white, Little Winston being black, walks into school and they both start acting up, what a lot of teachers will do, usually white teachers as well, I have to say, is they will look at Little Johnny and ask if there's a problem at home. And they would look at little Johnny and say, has your little Johnny, has he got dyslexia? Is there something? Does he need glasses? So and so. They'll look at little Winston and say, get out. And so they'll exclude him from the class. Once he's excluded from the class enough times, right, what happens is they suspend him. Now, if he's experiencing problems at home, he is now stuck at home with the people he's experiencing problems with.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, right. Then from that point, it becomes, we're going to expel him. We're going to put him in a unit. Right? There's a direct correlation between all of those things happening. 6 times more likely to happen to little Winston than to little Johnny, to little Winston ending up in jail, which then presents 43% of the population, of the jail population, is by us.
Yeah.
We represent how many percent in this country? Minuscule. That's what we represent. Yet we're nearly half the population of the prison population, and that's going down of young offenders. The prison the population is going down, but our aspect of it is going up. So that's all part of education as well. You know, education is not just what we read in the books. It's all part of how does a teacher view us? How does a teacher see us? How, you know, how do our... It's again, a question I asked you yesterday. What is the difference between a poor black boy and a poor white boy or girl, either? What is the difference? Living in poverty, living in socio-economic poverty. What is the difference? The only difference... Go on.
Their race.
That's it.
Their skin color. Yeah.
Their skin color. That is the only difference. Yet what happens? There's a privilege given to the white counterpart as opposed to the black counterpart. And from that privilege, there's a looking down upon.
Yeah.
And that starts way, way back. It doesn't start when we grow up and we walk into a workplace like a lot of people do. It doesn't start if you go to a football match and people are chanting on this. That's all been learned behavior. It's learned from schools. It's then passed on into our media. It's passed on into it's passed on into the TV and so on and so on and so forth. The media, so on and so forth. And still to this day, people expect us to be good at sports, dancing, singing. You know, the entertainment business. Yeah, we're allowed to flourish in that. You know, in other businesses. You know, like they don't expect us to be judges. Yeah. They don't expect us to be surgeons, you know, and I'm just using those as an example where the expectation is not there. I have had friends who have written screenplays and written shows that have gone up and presented them, and they've been told, nah, the audience would not believe that. Well, why? Because you're telling them not to believe that. Yeah. You are telling them not to believe that. And again, that's an education. This is why it's so important that the education system changes. Yeah. And, you know, it has to start with how we view ourselves, how we heal ourselves, how we go through, and how we question. How, you know, we question and that's risky. And I use that, when I say risky, I put that in inverted commas. It's risky for us as people, and it's risky for especially you young people to sit in school and go, hang on a second, this is not right. What are you saying here? Say that again. What does it say? Could you read that out to me? Because some of it I can't see.
So there's a comment in the chat, and it says, yes, I have been complaining at school that my daughter receives the certificate for sport and not maths, English, and science. She is a high achiever at all.
You see, now when I was at school, I was a high achiever, but hey, I was once a champion at sport. Yeah. One was a champion at shot put. One was a champion at discus. Do you know what I'm saying? I could run the 100 meters fast. Schoolboy, sports boy of the year. I was deputy head boy in my school, right? I was actually voted to become the head boy in my school. And it was said, no, we cannot have a black head boy. Wow. So I became deputy head boy. Wow. So, you know, it's, yeah. And so, again, and not a lot has changed since. Seemingly it has. But like I was saying to you yesterday, like when we had that brief conversation, you guys have a beautiful terminology like microaggression. I love that terminology because that's always existed, but we didn't have a terminology for it. Yeah. You guys have now, you know, what's it called? Virtue signaling or something? That there's another thing that you guys say. you know, is it virtue signaling? Something like that. But I just love those terms. It's where, you know, I have a term which I call, which you know, WMD, weapons of mass distraction, as opposed to destruction.
Weapons of mass distraction. I love that.
Yeah, well, yeah,
I
weapons
love
of
that.
mass distraction. It's really simple. If I have a complaint and I say something, you know, I feel victimized from a racist point of view. If I say it in an affirmative way, I'm considered to be aggressive.
Yeah.
Then what will happen is somebody will either cry or feel aggrieved about what I've said. They'll then complain because I am being aggressive because I have said something in a way, assertive way, but it's not perceived as that because I'm a big black man. So therefore, what happens then? The whole way of thinking then changes from what other point I've been making, and it's all been distracted the fact that I'm aggressive.
That you're aggressive.
So so the weapon of mass distraction comes into play then. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, my favorite is imposter syndrome. Love it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you know, we have to be aware. Look, before I step out of my house, right? As a child, before I step out of my house, I had to talk different, walk different, act different, look different, go into school, be different to who Trevor is. Why was that? Because I knew if I acted as Trevor, and I've learned now to act as Trevor, but if I acted as Trevor back then, I'd either get beaten up, chucked out of school, beaten by my mum for being chucked out of school, you know, well, you know, all of these situations will happen to me before I even walked into school. So before I even walked into school, I've got a guard up, I've got my armor up, I'm looking around me, you know. As an adult, I'm supposed to, if I see a woman walking across the road, right, and she's walking on that side of the road, and I want to go home to my house and she's walking past my house, I'm supposed to wait until she walks past my house because she's going to be afraid of me, right, if she happens to be a white woman, because I might, what?
Yeah.
I might walk into my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I had to say to two women the other day, as I'm walking down the road, and they're looking back at me, terrified. I had to say, can you stop doing that, please? I said, first of all, I'm walking down the road just as you are. I haven't committed any crime. I am not doing anything to you, but you are perpetuating this myth in your head that I'm going to do something. I'm not going to do anything to you. I am actually not going to do anything to you. And they walked off ashamed. You could see they fell into that shame and walked off. But their presumption was because I was walking behind them, and you know what I'd done? I'd actually unconsciously slowed my walk down
to make them. I don't know how many times I've done that. I've done that so many times.
There you go. And how old are you?
I'm 20.
How old am I? I'm 59.
Yeah.
Right? So, and this has been happening since before I was your age.
Yeah.
For me. And it's still happening for you.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. This all starts off from when we're children. So you asked me the question. That's why the education is so important for it to be changed.
Yeah.
For us to change it, and for them to change it, and for us to understand. You know, it's something I said yesterday to you as well. What people need to understand in these times is that pro-black doesn't mean anti-white. It just means pro-black.
It just means pro. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I'm proud to be pro-black. It doesn't mean I'm anti-white. As I said to you, I have a white wife and I have children of mixed heritage, right? I'm not anti-white, but I am definitely pro-black. Definitely. And things have to change. Okay. I don't know where to go with this now, brother.
Well, Trevor, you have been absolutely incredible. I mean.
Oh, thank you. Bless you.
Everything that you have said, like you said stuff that I'm like I want to go make a poster and put weapons of mass distraction. I actually want to make a poster and stick it up.
Do it.
Because that, you know what? Yeah, next week's episode, I'll show all the audience the poster that I made, because I'm actually going to make a poster. But yeah, you've been absolutely incredible. Thank you for everything that you said.
Thank you.
Yes, we're unfortunately going to move on to our next guest.
Of course.
But but thank you so much for coming and taking.
Thank you for having me.
Your time out to to inspire us and.
Well, can I just say something before you say that?
Go on.
Thank you for inspiring me. because you young people, trust me, I learned so much from you young people. You're teaching me. So thank you. It's a two-way process.
Yeah.
And that's how we keep it rolling. Two-way process.
Completely agree.
Bless you, my young brother.
All right. Bless you,
Bless
man.
you.
Thank you so much.
Bless you too.
And
thank you,
care.
everyone, for tuning in. Take care. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, 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 bye. Bye.
Wow. So much wisdom, so much knowledge, but also so much realness, you know, because we talk a lot about things coming from like a real place, but when you've lived for 59 years, there's stuff that you've experienced that I never would have experienced, or I have no idea about, and I think it's beautiful that we can sort of have a conversation and find that even though we have separate ages and we might have grown up very differently, we still have the same root issues, and this is exactly why we need to change. Because again, like, how can I be going through the same thing that a 59-year-old was going through before I was born? Like, it just blows my mind. So this is why change, like actual change, needs to happen. Because he said that he was deputy head boy because a black head boy wasn't allowed in their school. I might look at myself because I was the head boy and be like, oh, okay, so that means that things have changed because I was the head boy and people weren't allowed to be the head boy, and I'm now the head boy, so I feel really accomplished and I feel really good about myself. But it's so minor compared to the actual problem, and it's not different circumstances or different rules that need to change. No, it's the actual system, it's the actual mindset that tells you that I am something before you even know me. So yeah, so we are going to move on to our next guest. She is ready and waiting right now. She was on our first show a couple of weeks ago. I think it was about 3 weeks ago or something. She was on our first show, and after everything she said, I definitely wanted to invite her on the show about education. So without further ado, Ella, let's invite you on.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. You?
I'm all right. I'm good. I'm kind of like
still digested everything that Trevor. That's what I'm like.
There was a lot.
I know there was a lot to take in.
To take in, to digest. People think that I'm joking about that poster. Like, I'm actually gonna make the poster and put it up in my room. I'm not even joking. So Ella, so for those who do not know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Ella. I'm 18 years old. I'm 18 years old. I've just finished my A-levels, so they was cut short for COVID. So I'm just waiting to get my results and not currently doing anything that much. And come September, I'm going to start working for Hackney Church as an intern for a year. And I should be working with, I'm not too sure where I'll be working, but I'll be working with the church. Not too sure what area, but yeah, that's what I'm starting to do.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
So let's just get straight in, because I want to know, what has been your experience like as a person of colour in school?
I don't think I really acknowledged it until sixth form, to be fair.
Yeah.
I had that privilege not to acknowledge it, and I wasn't forced to acknowledge it. And I guess what my mum kind of drilled into me, so I was kind of naive of it, was it doesn't define who you are, and I never let it define me, essentially. Like, I never put that barrier up in my, I just never processed it properly, because I was always kind of surrounded by black people as I grew up. And I mean, I guess my friendship groups were always predominantly white, but I did also have black friends as well, not to say that, but I normally slid in because music taste, and this is something that I've been coming along with, was black people shouldn't be monolithed or monolithed together and be made as to put in one, because The only thing I think for me was trying to see where I fit into society as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's like, we don't realise how racist our society is and how much we kind of put everyone into a box straight away due to what type of music they like, how they dress, how they speak. And I was always put into the category of white because of the way that I speak and of the music I like. Not saying that I don't like black music typically, but what is black music? What is white music? And that's what I've been trying to challenge recently. And it's a long conversation. But I mean, going to school in Southeast London as well was interesting because I in Greenwich. So I actually don't know the stats, and I was like looking at my class picture and it wasn't as diverse as I remembered it being. But maybe that's because it just fluctuated within classes. I mean, there seemed to be the top classes seem to be more white than the bottom classes, and that might reflect on something. So, and I was always in the second set, so that might have reflected why my class looked like that and why I didn't see that much diversity within my class. Not saying that there wasn't, because there was, but during secondary school I did always see black people excel as well, which I was blessed for. And I think what subjects I love and I'll probably talk about most is history and English, because they're the two that I think shape you most. You might argue differently, but so my history teacher also grew up in Southeast London and went to school there and then decided to teach an all-girls school. Grew up in the same school where Stephen Lawrence got killed. Right. So he kind of always told us the liberal history as well, which was very interesting. So he always made sure that we knew the whole size of it, and we kind of got views from all of it. And we even did projects for World War to learn about World War II in the sides from the other side. So it kind of humanized it as well to see, like, because we almost we villainize the Germans, but we don't understand the struggle of the actual German people that were forced to go with this with Hitler and didn't agree with anything. And I think I got quite a good education where I was able to learn from both sides and to understand that there's a story for each perspective, really, and that we shouldn't just be so blind to stories. And it always made me then search deeper into history. And again, I was lucky with my history course. I've been lucky to learn about certain things and lucky to have access to materials that have allowed me to learn more. But I shouldn't have to been lucky to gain that, essentially. Yeah. And it's like, sorry, just closing my door. But I think it came more apparent when I went to school in West London, and you could count the amount of black people on one hand. And that is when I started to question. I was like, what does it mean to be black? Like, what are these barriers that are going to be put up for me now? But I never let it fully stop me, because I was like, the whole reason I went to a school in West London was to give me opportunities that I probably wouldn't have got if I stayed in East London. And again, that is a question that we need to ask. Why? Why would you get better opportunities in West London compared to East London? And my English teacher in A-levels, like you, I studied John Keats. I did Philip Larkin. So my poetry was Keats, Larkin, 2 Shakespeare texts, and I did Agatha Christie and Atonement as well. So they were all the books, and you can tell from all the writers were white predominantly. And then we got to choose a text to read as well for my coursework. Yeah. And I ended up doing Anna Karenina, which is actually a Russian book translated. But I didn't do colonial Britain because I was like, I'm not going to fit into the stereotype of the black girl that chooses to do a colonial text. And I was like, but why am I fighting that? Yeah. And it was kind of because all of not all of them, some of them chose to do colonial texts and to read from a colonial viewpoint. I decided to do general reading just to critique the book for what its value as it stood but they did a colonial reading. So one of my friends chose The Heart of Darkness, which I think is written by a white man again. I can't remember who the writer is, but what I'm gonna do is kind of explain a lot about books and how they've helped me, essentially, because I think I've literally got a whole pile of books here that I can kind of talk about to lead you in the right direction of stuff. But The Heart of Darkness is a book that is about slavery. I think it's about, I'm not too sure it's about the Middle Passage, but I think it's quite deep. I haven't read it myself. I was starting to read it, and it's put into literature, and it's one of the it's in the canon of literature and all of that, and people rave on about it. But there was this whole argument of, is it racist or if it's not? But it's clearly a racist book. And Joseph Conrad and or something. And my friend who did it is such a clever man. He's mixed race himself, but honestly, if you heard him talk about this subject, I used to just sit and listen to him for ages, and he's proud to be black and is just so clever, going off to uni next year to read law, I believe. And it's just, he did this whole essay on how it is racist and how we haven't come far from colonialism at all. And then I think my other friend read The Colour Purple, which is also and again, not one that I've read. I was going to start reading it actually this summer. Is another one that I suggest about friendship, but she did a colonial reading of that. I didn't read her essay, but we actually fought to do a presentation on Black history and why Black history is British history. And my school was a secular school, so it refused to ever mention Black history at all, which was another thing that we took an issue of. Like, it was quite hard as well, because the school claimed to be diverse, but if you went on the school website, it was painful and uncomfortable to watch their video, because it's like you saw the token people that they put on there, like the token Black people and the token disabled person that they had in the video, and it was just like it's like elitism is so closely linked with whiteness as well. And my copy is a bit mashed up because I've been carrying it around everywhere with me, but this book British by Afua Hirsch, absolutely amazing read. I mean, don't think Black people they're welcome to read it, but I don't think Black people should be forced to read these books, because we shouldn't be forced to have to learn about our history. And something she mentions here, because Afua Hirsch is a mixed race woman, middle class, went to a private school all her life and went on to Oxford. So she kind of she was like, I have the privilege not many people have, and she, similar to me, didn't see the barriers that were there because they weren't there for her, essentially. Like, she's like, I was privileged enough not to think that I had to be the best in my class, etc., to get to this place, where her husband is a Black man that grew up in South East London, I think, and he was a barrister. They met together when they was training to be barristers, and he had all these barriers and to get there, and she was like, I just didn't go. It's honestly an amazing book, and something that I really suggest that everyone kind of reads. It's such an amazing book on race, identity and belonging. And it talks about education, actually, especially within university, because, sorry if I'm boring you, I'm rambling on, but
cool. Go.
Education in university, I'm going to mainly talk about Oxford and Cambridge, the two, elite best universities in the world in Britain, right? And where she went to Oxford, she was explaining that she did African politics at one point as well. I think that's what her degree was in. And in order to do her research for the African politics, she had to walk past the statue of a slave owner every day to get into the library that he funded, where these books were kept, for her to find this information out. Right. And she was like, the irony of this is that I'm literally having to do this, that this was funded by slavery, and that Oxford refused to acknowledge it. And there's been many petitions for Oxford to change this, but they refuse, because they're like, I'm not going to be politically correct. We're not going to be politically correct, because that's not, like, it's history. And there's like loads of videos as well. She actually did a a documentary on Oxford and the racism, and she does this interview with this professor there, and he describes what racism is, and it is what this figure is. But then she goes, so was that person racist? And he's like, no, he wasn't. And it's like just that constant denial of denying racism that exists, even like they'll be able to explain it for you, but not accept it. And I think we need to accept that that there is racism within our society for it to change.
Yeah.
And it's also another good, this is actually on the what is white history, but it's white art history. I think this is quite important because the art that we also see reflects, like, I've never seen myself reflected in a painting in the National Gallery, or I haven't seen a person that looks like me recline beautifully on a sofa, or you know, or or do you get what I mean? And this book again describes it. Even as a woman itself, I've never seen someone that looks like me body wise reflected like me in a painting. And I did a whole 4,000 word essay on how the woman's body is perceived last year, and it was actually just focused, I hadn't realised this until now really, it was focused on white Eurocentric body, and that is what we class as art history. And I mean, look at Picasso's work and you cannot say that he was not inspired by African art. And if you look into Picasso as well, it's quite hilarious because you look at his art and then I was like, no, there's no way that a white man did this artwork. Like, it's just so African inspired. And then I did my research and he actually spent a lot of time in Africa and had a lot of servants that were of African descent as well. I was like, that's quite interesting to know because his artwork and the patterns do not reflect a European style at all for that time. And I just think it's important that we know how art shapes our minds, and what we see allows us to adapt in a certain way as well. I think it's important because it teaches you about yourself. If you haven't been able to absorb your culture as you grow up, you need to learn about it somehow, or there's just going to be them questions constantly in your head. I think as well is we're forced to absorb white culture essentially all our lives. And it's, I mean, if I asked you, name, what is it, divorced, beheaded and died, divorced, beheaded, survived, you know exactly where that's from.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if I asked you about, I think Trevor actually mentioned it, the case of the Zong earlier, don't think you'd be able to tell me as much as that. And that was like a pivotal moment in our history. Or to tell me more people other than Olado Equiano that's in Black history, because there was so many. And I just think it's key to acknowledge this as well when we learn, because Olado Equiano wasn't the only Black person that existed at the time that slave trade was trying to end. And there was plenty of educated British people around at that time. And that's kind of as well what British goes into. It talks about the history of Britain and Black people's history in Britain, as well as exploring what is happening now. So there's a lot of issues that are happening now that this book speaks about as well. And I won't go into stuff because it's a bit graphic, but yeah. And there's another few books as well. Where the Crawdads Sing. This is bad because I study English, but I don't know the difference between fiction and non-fiction.
Fiction is made up or
right. Yeah, this is fiction.
Not non-fiction. Yeah, based on real life.
Thought so. Yeah. This is a fiction book called Where the Crawdads Sing. It's doing really well at the moment actually, and over 5 million copies have been sold. And I think it's a really good example of, like, it doesn't outwardly go, oh, she's Black or whatever, but it's just a really good example. As you read the story, it's like a crime thriller, a mystery murder. As you go through the story, you kind of see the inherent biases of people, and it kind of explores that from a girl's view that doesn't actually understand what it means to be Black, because she isn't it's in a time where there isn't mass media, so it's like she's outcasted into society, not just because of her skin color, but for other reasons as well. But it's quite interesting to see, because you almost fall complicit as well with people's stereotypes in this book, and it's just a really good book to read as well, and it's a good one to relieve a little bit of stress if you are taking on a lot of information. I found that there's a few, like, as well. Another good one is another one that's come out recently, Girl, Woman, Other, by Bernadine Evaristo. I think she's actually become the first Black woman to be at the charts as well for #1 selling book as well in Britain. But it's a brilliant book, especially for the acting world as well. I thought that book was amazing, and it follows loads of different women and their like lives interchange, and loads of different people of color. And it starts off with a woman, and she's putting her play, a Black woman that's putting her play in the National. So it explores that, and it's like no one's ever put a play. It just in this book, it's where no one has ever put a play of with ethnic minorities on stage, essentially, about ethnic minorities. Like, it's not a Shakespeare play, but it's about like a story that she's wrote herself about okay, just to explain it is, so in Black Panther, there's the warriors that look after T'Challa.
Yes.
The women. So it's basically based off of where they are, their story. I forgot the name of them, but it starts off there, and it's going through them and exploring sexuality. And it's also a good book, LGBTQ as well. It explores that and being Black with that. So that was a really enjoyable read as well. And then I've got one that is one for Christians as well. So this is like, we need to talk about race, and this is specifically for the church. So it's We Need to Talk About Race by Ben Lindsay. And okay. He's been on this fight for years, this man. I've heard him speak loads of times. He runs a church in Southeast London, in Greenwich, I think. Might be wrong, somewhere in Southeast London. But he just talks about how no one in church, like leadership, is reflected in the Dahomean female warriors. That is what the story is about, and about same-sex relationships and all of that. It's great. And then this talks about the church and racism within the Church of England, and how I think it's only 2%. I think it's 2% of like people that work in the clergy are actually in leadership in the church, and how that reflects and why there's such an outbreak of other non-denominational churches with people of colour, because we're not seen represented in the Church of England. And speaking to people in my church as well that are of colour, or listening to them speak, it's like there's loads of counselling for people of colour that want to enter the Church of England, because it is so hard and there's barriers before you even get in there. And it's just it gives you really good pointers as well, and questions to ask yourself at the end of each chapter, if you are white, Black, or a leader of the church. So that one's a really good one to just ask questions with. Then one that I've like tried to start so many times but never been, I like read it and I'm like, it's not going in, and it's a really good book. All my friends have read it and tell me it's amazing, but is the classic. It is a really good book, but like I start to read it and I'm like, I shouldn't have to read this. And that's how I feel with a lot of these, not the fiction ones, a lot of non-fiction books I find a bit challenging to read and to digest. And I think that's what, I guess loads of people find it hard to digest. But as a Black person, I'm like, why has this been erased from my history classes? Why isn't this pain that I'm feeling alone happening with my peers in my class? Or why aren't my teachers there to support me? And like another thing that I think that's helped me massively understand it is going to, again, Young and Talented, and being able to explore them questions within the acting world. But I think TV has such a huge role to play, and I guess what we see has and what we do has such a huge role to play. And I just bought another 3 books actually, just to recommend as well. They are in the canon, and they're not by Black authors, but I just think they're quite important books to read as well. They're on the LGBT community as well, but I just think that ties in quite. It's 2 communities that are kind of not looked upon, and it's Maurice by E.M. Forster, a beautiful book, beautifully written book, and Oscar Wilde, Pictures of Dorian Gray, because these 2 books, if you think about them, they shouldn't have been written at the time they were, yet they've managed to be put into our canon of literature. And I just think they're examples of 2 books of why we question us, like, why can't we have more Black authors that were writing at that time, or Black poets at that time, because there were loads, and we shouldn't just be subjected to read what's her name, Elizabeth Browning's poems. And she was commissioned to write poems in the perspective. She was a white woman in England, she was commissioned to write poems in the Black woman's perspective in the 19th century, and that just shouldn't have happened, because I'm sure there was educated Black people that would have written poems to be published in American newspapers to emancipate slaves. And it shouldn't. I mean, it is a good show of solidarity, but again, it's like, why did we have to go through that? And I think that needs to be taught to us. And another one is this trilogy is called, it's by Ken Follett. He's a liberal writer, and it's the trilogy of Fall of Giants, and it goes through the whole of the 20th century. And the last book, which is called Edge of Eternity, you don't need to read all of them, but I was to say on this topic, if you was to read all of them, I'd say Edge of Eternity, as it goes through the 1960s Segregation Act in America. And it's so hard to read, and I'm still getting through it, but it gives you such a human look into the 1960s segregation, and it also allows you to empathise with, we haven't come that far, and America has not moved on since then. And I was like, it was so weird, because I was reading that when George Floyd happened, and you look at the Birmingham, there was an issue within Birmingham, Alabama, and well, like, Alabama, Texas was known as like the capital of racism back then as well. And there was the Birmingham bombing, that was it, where they bombed a church on Sunday, and they killed three or four. It ended up killing 3 or 4 young girls. The youngest, I believe, was 9, and then the rest were 13/14.
Wow.
And the pictures on the news as well from like a week before that got out nationally was a picture of, it's a Black boy standing there, 2 police in the background, and a police dog biting and clinging onto his hand. And you look at that picture and you think, America has not taken 2 steps forward at all. And the book actually ends with Obama becoming president. And then I just think, wow, like the book ends in 2008, and I'm like, America's just went so far behind since then. It's now 2020, and I don't think people watching Obama come to presidency in 2008 who were born in the 1960s would be impressed with what's happening today at all. And you just think of the suffering, 400 years of suffering to actually get nowhere. And that's the pain that it brings, and that we have to understand and push through and talk about, and to understand, and to kind of erase that isn't our only history. Yeah. Black people were in Britain since the Roman Empire existed, you know, and it's just crazy that we're told that didn't happen. Like, you know, there's actually a picture, there's a painting from Henry VIII's reign with he has a black trumpeter, And there's letter proof that this black trumpeter actually wrote to Henry VIII and was like, you need to start paying me the same amount as your other people. And I think he even ended up like paying him even more than others.
Wow.
And yeah, there's like all this proof, and it was just like he fought for his rights and he got it because he was like one of Henry VIII's favoured people in court. But that's not told when you learn about Henry VIII. And it's just pretty interesting what we are told and what's left out, and then how we like the only other access as well that I've seen into this subject other than books is through going to university. And I'm like, you shouldn't have to fight for a university education in order to find this information out, because at the end of the day, university isn't everything, and university is not made for everyone. And people shouldn't be forced to go to university, to these white institutionalized places to learn about themselves. And that by learning about themselves, it's also going to be whitewashed. It just doesn't, like, it kind of just doesn't make sense. And I think even with coronavirus happening has showed us how weak our education system is. And our education system is not made to hold many things. And again, I think we just need to reform our education system in general, because it doesn't support everyone. And when I say it doesn't support everyone, I mean Black people, people with disabilities, LGBT people, people of different faiths even, because it's just like everyone needs their own kind of education. Like for me, I was done with education when it came to 16, but I was still forced to take it for 2 years, where I think it would have been better if I looked at different routes. But it's like the only route you're given is go to uni. And it's like that doesn't work. And you then drive the people that don't want to go to uni into poverty, and that shouldn't be the way it should be. You should be figuring out a path. How will they best help the economy to grow the economy? And, you know, it's just, we need to change the education system, and a lot will follow after. I think always with society, the first step is education, and then the rest follows.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I also believe in if we took on more, took on more immigrants would also benefit the society economically, because I swear, even in school, I never saw more people work harder than first generation people in class. Like, they was always working the hardest. And I think if we gave more people the opportunity, they would show us. And it's not even that they should have to work the hardest, but, you know, they value. So why don't we value them? They value our education, so why don't we value them as well? But yeah. Don't know what else to say. I'm taking up lots of time.
But I really appreciated all the resources that you put forward. Everyone who's watching this on the YouTube or watching this on the live right now, I need you to go and, like, even if you don't remember all of the books,
I can send you them later to upload, or I'll comment later on this post. I'll comment all the books that I recommended.
Brilliant. Yes, I check out at least one of the texts. You know, do something extra to expand your knowledge, because we know that in education a lot of the time it's not only that some things are missed out, but what is said is usually from the white perspective, and it's nice to sort of see a lot of the stories that have already been told, as you said, through different people's eyes. And I thought it was really interesting when you said, why can't I, you know, when I'm learning about this heartbreaking stuff, why can't I be with my peers and having teachers to support me through it? Because it's a difficult thing to hear.
I remember learning about the Holocaust, and that being, the story that we watched that I remember crying in class to was the boy in striped pajamas.
The boy in the striped
The boy in
pajamas.
striped pajamas.
Everyone
Like,
cried at that because it was.
yeah, and
so
I
sad.
remember watching and reading it, and I cried at and was supported by my classmates, and we went through the emotions together, and we went through the heartbreak and of understanding the detrimental effect of the Holocaust. And you think that was 8 million Jews. Just alone in Germany. You have to also remember that they went into Russia and killed loads of Jews in Russia, as well. And there's endless amounts, but 8 million Jews, and counting still, because they're finding mass burials, were killed. But you have to think that was over the span of mass killings of 5 years, whereas slavery was 400 years. I don't think you could put the total of people that were killed, raped, murdered, you know, during those times on scale. And it's just like, why are we? I mean, it's fine that we're learning about what happened in World War II, and I think it's relevant as well, or what happened in the Cold War. But why aren't we learning about this 400-year-long of oppression that caused? I don't even know the amount of people that died from slavery. I think that is wrong. Whereas I could recite 8 million people died in the Holocaust, and it's like they're similar thing. They are the mass genocide of people. So why aren't we taught that? And I just think, you know, hopefully we can see change, and I hope that when I send my kids to school that they can teach me. And that but I also don't want our suffering just to be taught. I want our successes to be taught as well. But yeah, hopefully I can see when my kids are in school that they are being taught our successes and our oppression, and being shown that they can succeed themselves, and that it's not on them to pave the way, because the way is already paved, essentially.
Listen, Ella, thank you so much for everything you said, all of your contributions. As I've already said, Ella is a very kind person, so I know that she's going to send me all the links. And so if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, then you'll see all the links in the description. So go and check out all the resources. Share them around. But yeah, Ella, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.
Yes. See you soon.
See you soon.
Right.
Have a great evening. Bye.
You too. Take care. Awesome. Okay. Brilliant. Wow. So for those who joined during Ella, or maybe you joined during Trevor, but we've been talking about education and why it's so important to make education more diverse, why certain things need to be accessed in education, and also certain things that are missed out in the curriculum need to be added. And so lastly, talking about that, I'm going to quickly, I'm so sorry, Fatima, because we've only got 10 minutes to have you on. We're still going to have you on, but I mainly want to talk about a message that I got from Fatima, but I'm going to talk about it with her when I invite her on. So without further ado, let's invite you on.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? I'm good.
It feels like it's been too long since I've seen you.
It's like it's been a lifetime. Like, college was only 2 years ago as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that seems like a long time ago, but yet not a long time ago.
Yeah, it's so weird because so much happens in that small time.
Yeah, it's mad.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know you, could you just let them know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Fatima. I'm 20 years old. I'm an English literature student at the University of Birmingham. And I know Jordan from, we studied together film at Leighton Sixth Form College in East London together. And I've just been chilling during coronavirus, but also doing a lot of reading as well. And yeah.
Fantastic. So I I'm so sorry that we've run so over. But
don't worry about it. It's fine. It's been really interesting to hear about it. It's so nice to hear other people talk about it as well.
Yeah, it is. And but I mainly wanted to ask you about a message that I got from you regarding the petition for late in sixth form. So for those who didn't get that message because they didn't go, can you just talk to us about what that message was?
So basically, after the whole George Floyd situation, there was a lot of petitions going around to decolonize curriculums and to encourage a new type of learning within school systems. And so me and my sister drafted a letter to our old college late in sixth form, which was basically to encourage more training in how to talk about Black lives, Asian lives, all people of colour, how to encourage different forms of learning, especially reading, and basically ask them to take responsibility as well, so you know what you're teaching your students. Because, so to answer one of your questions they've asked before, so I studied in primary school, it was mainly all Asian and Black students, and the teachers were white. And then in college, you need a microscope to find any white student, but our teachers are white. University, 70% are white students and all white lecturers. And on my course, 400 English students, there's like 7 Asian students and 2 Black students. But it's still the same thing across all types of education, where it's white writers, white historians, white academics. So what we wanted to do is encourage, to turn the tables and encourage Black writers and Asian writers, as well as historians, to be accepted.
So, brilliant. Yeah. So one thing that I want to know off the back of that is why is that so important? Like, what is that actually going to achieve?
I think it's so important because, first of all, when you have a curriculum that is completely white, it's showing that, first of all, they are the only people that are accepted, but they're the only ones that have value and have worth. When you have a more diverse curriculum, it shows people that not only are you accepted, but you have the same amount of worth as a white person does. You have the same achievements. You have had empires before in history, but why is it we're not taught about that stuff instead, or as well as it? I don't understand why there's this whole pick and choosing, or everything has to be one, everything has to be the other. And I think it's, you know, when people get defensive about it. So what I'm going to talk about is, in that book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, she says in the chapter about feminism, feminism is an ideology and the patriarchy is an institution they're fighting against. But why is it so difficult to see whiteness in the same way as an ideology and you're fighting against white privilege? It's like, you know, when we do this whole letter, and I say to people, or my lecturers, why don't you study more Asian people or Black people? They get defensive because they think you're attacking them. And it's like, I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying that you need to be more inclusive of your students and of your country and of your countrymen, because that is what makes your entire community. So I don't understand why there isn't equal representation. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah. Absolutely true. And I was reading some case studies when I was preparing for this. And there was an article that I read, and it said that freedom of information requests from 128 universities when it comes to the topic of decolonizing education. And it said only 24 universities out of 128 said they were committed to decolonizing the curriculum in some way, because most of them said that they would only do it in their English department, or they would only look at it in certain departments. I think only 11 said that they were looking at it across the board. And so that's 11 universities out of 128. So my question to you is why do you think schools or institutions, because this seems like a cause that makes sense, you know, so why do you think schools and universities and institutions are so hesitant to do this?
I think it comes back to that whole thing of they feel like they're being attacked. So if I'm saying that you need to do more of this, then they think that I'm attacking them for saying that you're not doing enough. Well, first of all, I don't understand why you get so defensive, because I kind of am attacking you, but it's a natural reaction to have, because it's like you have completely eradicated an entire people from your syllabus. I think that they are so scared of letting other people learn about themselves for whatever reason, because why wouldn't you want Asian people or Black people to have the same power that you have, or educate others? And I think it's because the entire education system since the 60s in this country, or since the 20s in this country, has been predicated on encouraging, advertising, broadcasting whiteness. And so when you tell people that you need to change things, they think that everything they've done in the past has been wrong, which, first of all, is kind of true, but it's also that if you want to really learn, why don't you just do it? But it's the added hesitation that shows this whiteness that is just so toxic, because that's the first barrier. And if you can't accept what I'm saying, how are we going to go even further? So you need to get over that whole thing of whiteness and white privilege, and then encourage other writers to be introduced.
Yeah. So sort of like a random question. Did you ever do citizenship or PSHE in secondary school?
If I did, I can't remember it because I don't remember secondary school. But yeah, in terms of history and all the other subjects and English as well, everything was completely white. Completely. The only thing we learned about was Soviet Russia, I think, in history. And that was it. The only time I learned about Black history was civil rights in sixth form. And that was the only teacher I had. She was an Asian teacher and Muslim like me. But that was the only time. I think once the problem with the whole education system is that there's a further education where you're conditioned to accept whiteness in your own reading. So for a long time, I was only reading texts written by white authors. But even that, it's like, why am I doing that? Why am I not reading about my own people or Black people? So I think there's two stages of consciousness that need to be reached, where you think that your people have worth, and then you go and see what that worth is. You see what the value is. And then you realize that there's a whole gap in your knowledge because of what you've been taught in school. And then it's up to us to fill that gap with different materials.
Yeah. So the reason why I specifically ask about citizenship or PSHE, because I know that for me, and I know that a lot of other people had this weird experience, but in secondary school, citizenship was compulsory for me to do as a GCSE. But of course, if you've done citizenship or PSHE, then you'll know that it covers things like sexually transmitted diseases, or it covers like drug use and things like that, right? But I've always sort of thought that, okay, but if I'm learning in citizenship everything to do with being a citizen, or everything to do with personal social care, then why am I not learning about racism? Why am I not learning about that kind of thing, which is going to be very important to me as a citizen? And then what it does is it makes me completely ignorant to it. If I'm not learning it at home, or if I don't have the resources to learn about it, then all it means is that I'm ignorant to it. So then when I go and experience it, then that's a whole different, it's sort of like sending someone into a test and throughout school telling them, you don't need a pen. 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 And then they get to the test, they don't have a pen. And they're like, well, how am I going to do this test? Because I don't have a pen. And it's sort of like, why would you send children into sort of the real world or the working world without preparing them first for how the world sees you, how the world can change, some people's views about you, where that comes from? Why are we not preparing children for this? Because they go out and they experience it, and then it can have loads of different repercussions because of that, because they weren't prepared for it. So how practically do you think schools can better prepare students for the world that we live in when it comes to racism and such?
I think for me, I can answer, because as an English student, the main thing to do, I think, is to put Black and Asian people onto a syllabus and then show about history, about theory, philosophy, psychology, because it goes into all of those fields. And then you know that they can accomplish things in those fields as well as other things. And I think it's really important to have that, because then you know, like, I would never send my child to a school where they didn't encourage any of that, because it's like, then they're not ready for the real world. See what I mean? Yeah. And then I remember in primary school, we have school houses. We had, the red house was Neil Armstrong, you had Nelson Mandela, you had Rosa Parks and Muhammad Ali. But we weren't taught about any of those three, because it's like kind of like they don't want us to know because they themselves are embarrassed about their own history of what they have done in this whole history of oppression. And I was reading a book the other day and we say when we talk about liberation, we automatically think of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, but we're not taught about them because it's kind of a danger because they were so powerful, and Black people, Asian people are not allowed to be powerful. But it's like, why is that? Why? I don't understand what this education system is so afraid of and allowing Black students to have power. And that's the whole point of, that's the whole reason of what racism is, and it is white people having prejudice plus power.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's like there needs to be a whole fundamental change. But even that, having just Black writers on a course, it's such a big deal for an institution like my university to have. Why is it so hard for you to do that and to be accepting of other people? So I think it's up to the individual as well to have a structural change in your own head to know that me as a white person, I'm not the only one out there. There's loads of others and they need to be valued more than my white peers. So yeah.
Well, Fatima, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but everything that you have said in the last, I think it's been about 18 minutes or 17 minutes, has been absolute gold. So thank you so much.
It's been really fun. It's been really good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking out the time to be here and not just be here for your slot, but be here throughout the entire show. So thank you, and everything you said.
Thanks for having me.
Has been really valuable, and of course all the clips will be on the Young and Talented YouTube channel. If you don't know and you're watching this right now, it's all going to be on the Young and Talented YouTube channel, so make sure that you go over there and you watch all of it. If you missed the beginning or if you missed this bit, then go over there, give it a watch, and really digest everything that has been said, because we live in a world that moves so fast that it's difficult for anything to get done because everyone's moving. But now that we are actually in a place where everything is kind of a standstill, I mean, things are starting to move now, but they're moving very slowly.
Very slowly, too slowly.
It's very, very slowly. So it's like in this time, let's use this time to not only educate ourselves and do this, yes, but also think about how we can bring change to our schools and how we can, be that person who books an appointment with the head teacher and says, listen, I want to learn about this. I want to learn about this. Why don't we learn about this? Don't wait for someone else to do it. Why don't you be the person to do it?
Yeah.
But yeah, again, Fatima, thank you so much. Thank you also to Ella and Trevor for being on the show. This has been I Can't Breathe, the show where air is free. See the change, be the change. Let's be the change. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you again for joining.
Thanks, Jordan.
And take care. Take care, Fatima.
You too. Bye.